Welcome back, everybody. It is 3:03. We'll convene this board briefing, and we're going to jump right in with a discussion on ARPA funds. I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Okay, so I just sent this out to the leadership team. I've been working on this just today. I've been cataloging over the last several months of, oh, that could go to ARPA, that could go to ARPA. And so this isn't complete, but it's we have to start talking about this because of some deadlines. So I didn't want to miss another opportunity to get it in front of you. Was working with the treasurer's office back and forth a lot today, but they haven't had a chance to look at all of this in its entirety to confirm numbers. So this is where we are with ARPA. Funds have to be obligated by the end of this by the end of this calendar year, and they have to be spent by the end of 26. Did find out today that the interest accumulated does not have to be obligated by the end of this calendar year. So we have a little bit of wiggle room, which you'll see in the numbers I've backed out. So what you have on the first page is all of the projects that you did the award through. Actually, this has, you remember we had the urgent projects, we got the money and pushed some funding out, and then went through the competitive process. This has all of those. I did find in looking at some of the expenditures, there have been little charges here and there that have gone to the fund, and I don't have all of those on there, but they're pretty minor. So everything in gray is completed. If there is a value in the balance that is red, that means it is up for grabs. The full award wasn't spent, so it goes back into the ARPA pot. There's only one outstanding community project, and that's the one at the bottom for the City of Tillamook Wastewater Management Plan. We have a contract with them, so they do have more time to spend it, but I think they're well underway with that project, so I wouldn't be surprised if we get an invoice for it here soon. The rest of the items in white are outstanding projects that you have already said ARPA funding will go to. As you know, with Global Grant Services and Court Security, we extended the contract out as long as possible on those, and you see the balance. Marlene's Equity and Inclusion Plan and Communications Plan, she has outstanding funds there, but does plan to have a contract in place. She's working on that now by the end of this calendar year. The public safety radio system, there's a balance there, and I don't think we need to change the amount to spend. I need to get updated contracts with federal engineering to help bridge the gap between when our bond funding becomes available and being able to further the work in developing the RFP and whatever else is needed, and updating the website and closing out the Praxis contract. So I think 12,000 is pretty good with what's outstanding. The housing opportunities, I'm waiting to hear back from Sarah on that. It has not been spent. It was supposed to go for housing projects, but long story short, it didn't, and I don't know if it's going to. I have some old correspondence, but I wanted to clarify with Sarah, and I haven't heard back from her. This just happened today, verifying that she does not need that. So there actually might be another 400,000 that is available. So more to come on that. And the emergency site preparations at the fair, I'm waiting to hear back from Cami on the timeline of when that would be spent, because it's not spent yet. The courthouse improvements, there was an amount of, the lighting replacements in the courthouse. There was an original award of 28,000. The balance was budgeted to be in Fund 301 this year, and I would recommend that it gets increased. We have a lot of money to spend, so I'm just going to recommend that we increase from 28,000 to 115,000 to pay all the cost of the interior lighting upgrades out of ARPA instead of pulling out of 301. We have a call out for bid right now, so if we get bids for that, and we've had a lot of interest, we should have a contract before the end of the year, and we would that project would be supported. Questions on the first page?
Yes, so you said that the amounts in red are up for grabs. I'm sure you didn't mean that literally.
I do mean it literally.
Okay, so
you'll see it on the next page.
It's on the back.
Okay, so I'm yeah.
We could
like,
say unspent.
like, right, like the Colchis house, that work has begun and they're sure to need that money, so,
They don't, we're gonna talk about it.
okay.
Yep. Questions on page one?
How many of these, it appears to me, in not knowing the background on all of these are essentially one-time expenditures,
Yes.
right? Is there anything that has a continuing obligation?
Yes, without going through all of them, I know right off the bat, court security and global grant team have to continue.
But it's a year-by-year contract, so we're not committed to it other than we want the service. So beyond the end of the ARPA money, we haven't committed ourselves to it, if you mean
We're
that
not
way
on the hook
ongoing.
if we can't find funding.
If we can't find funding, we say sorry, and I don't see us doing that with court security. Obviously, we will have to find a way to fund that, but the contract itself, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Does that
So
clarify,
my main
Doug?
question is, we didn't
No,
sign on to a long-term. Okay,
no,
good.
no.
We signed on to as long as, because we knew we had the money, we knew we wanted the service, we signed on to as long a term as possible.
Right. So when the money's gone, it's gone.
Yes. Yeah, that's why we didn't hire any people. We
Yeah,
didn't do
yeah,
any of
yeah.
those things that
Yep.
would
Okay.
not have been smart to do, Doug.
Got it.
Okay? Okay, so on the back page is my recommendations of how we start spending this. So we're gonna walk through the top part before we actually get to the projects first. So, we have an outstanding balance of allocated projects, so everything in the black and the white, of $1 million. So that's this number here.
Mhm.
That's your committed, we're already doing, provided you agree with the recommendation to not fund the lighting grades fully, the remainder out of 301, and if there's no other changes to the yellow highlights. So that could go up. The unspent balance is just a data point, it doesn't really carry forward, it just basically shows you what went back into the
Cash.
pot, and obviously the biggest ticket there is the BLM building. Okay, so on the left side, ARPA cash yesterday was the 3.1. The interest through today is 268,692. If you back that out, we're gonna be looking at these numbers a couple different ways. If you back out the interest, because we don't have to spend it, we don't have to obligate it by the end of this fiscal year, it gives us room to have money next year that we haven't obligated, which is actually really important, I think, given some of these other projects that we would like to do that we're just not ready to move forward with yet. So I am looking at this, that we have 2.875 to obligate by contract, cannot go to employee costs by the end of December. That to me is the urgent number we need to be looking at. I took a stab at interest, again, Treasurer's Office hasn't looked at this number, going through 26, so that could be less. Added with the interest we know we have, there's potentially a little over 300,000 of other projects that we may just wanna keep in a reserve fund, or keep these funds in a reserve. Cause we're getting to projects where it's like, oh, we got the money, we need to spend it on things, but there are other things that we wanna spend it on, so having a reserve would be wise. So then the outstanding balance of allocated projects, that's the black number to the right that I pulled into the left column. And then I show the 1.8, which is the amount to obligate by the end of this calendar year.
That's the 1,855,402, right?
Yes, if you take from up above the 2.8 in bold,
Mhm.
which is our cash less interest, and you take off your commitments of 1.019, the balance you need to allocate contract for 1.8. So you need to decide very soon how you want to spend this, because a lot of this needs to be procured up against those timelines. Does that make sense so far?
Yes.
How we
By
want to phase it?
December 31.
You need a contract in place.
Signed
Plenty of
contract.
time to spend, but you
Yeah.
need a contract in place. And some of this doesn't need a contract, but a large number of things do, depending on how you want to spend it.
So if you don't, what happens to the money?
It goes away.
Back to the feds?
Yep.
Use it or lose it?
Yes. So let me help you spend it. So,
And what are summarize the restrictions? In other words, there must be some sidebars or some walls on the side. What can't you spend it on?
employee costs. And I think, and there's a lot of guidance on that, and it's changed over time. Where we are now, and please, Sean, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Where we are now is, it's pretty broad. It's no employee expenses, and it's no things, obviously, that we wouldn't spend money on, like lobbying and things like that.
Yes.
It's pretty wide open, and I believe everything on this.
Basically, it's, so it appears that it's something solid, a capital asset, or something that has a longer than a 1 month life or something like, in other words, it's equipment or studies in some cases that fold into what's longer term.
No.
I don't-
It was,
I don't wanna
Doug,
get in
the
weeds, but-
original thing was general government.
Right,
And so
yeah, I
then they
remember that.
removed employees. So it's, it's general government, so if it makes sense in our operations, it seems it's something that we're allowed to do. Just they pulled in the last go around employee expenses, which we were able to do in the beginning. There's Sean. Sean, do you have a quick, short?
Well, I think Rachel got the most of the gist of it. Is it can't be something long term and no employees. That was kind of the biggest one that we were allowed to in the first round of being able to spend the funds on. So no, I think what has been said in there is pretty close. And your audio really cuts in and out, just so you know.
Doug and Mary Faith, maybe your microphones.
Well, I haven't spoken yet, but I'm happy to start. Did you have anything else, Rachel?
No, I was gonna start going through the list if you were ready for that.
I'd love it if you just explained to me about the Kilch's house expense.
It's in the list. I was gonna hit it when we got there. Okay. So it's the first one, big trout bridge. So Kilch's house has a balance of 614,000, and purchasing of bridge beams has a balance of 81,000. In talking with Chris and looking at the timing of all of this, we landed on a solution to make sure the money got spent to reallocate those balances. The combined balance of those two public works projects is 695,406. It's stated on the other side, and Chris is proposing to use 689,000 for big trout bridge. And
Okay,
he has the other ways to accommodate the Kilch's house.
okay, that's what I was curious about, because I know that project is still happening and we have a match, it's FEMA funding, we have a match. So could we not, because we have this excessive balance, can we not do both?
Perhaps, yeah. Yeah, this is just the first set of projects. As I was cranking through, I got everybody's updates, and Chris said he had Kilch's house covered, so I didn't even include it for extra. But we're gonna be talking about this again.
All right, thank you.
I do see that Chris is with us, just FYI if we needed clarity.
Do you want to talk about that, Chris, since I'm asking questions about it? I have felt great about knowing that our match was secure with these ARPA funds, but obviously we also need money for Big Trout Bridge.
So the dollar amounts of the Big Trout Bridge and the Kilch's house match are very similar. And because of the timing of this, wanted to make sure that, we spent the money timely. The Big Trout Bridge is 75% reimbursable by FEMA. So that 75% reimbursable that we get for big trout would go into, would be set aside to be the match money for Kilch's House. That's 75%. I can't use road gas tax money on anything other than roads, and Kilch's House is not a road. So, however, the TLT portion that the road department receives can be spent on things other than roads, which isn't exactly what the commissioners said, but that remaining 25%, 75% reimbursed from FEMA, and the other 25% I propose to come out of the TLT revenue, and that would make that match for Kilch's House whole. So that's how I would get the match money for Kilch's House.
Okay,
Or more specifically, the money I've had set aside to pay big trout would then be set aside for Kilch's.
okay, okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Continue.
The BLM traffic analysis, all of the due diligence spent toward exploring the purchase of and the feasibility of the BLM property was charged to ARPA. There was work done by a consultant. We had a contract for traffic analysis that was months ago, but we haven't received an invoice for it yet. I just caught that today. So the full contract was, I think, $12,500, $12,500, and I'm guessing he didn't. I just put a number there that we may get a bill for that. So I will follow up with him on that. The jail generator, a grant was submitted. It wasn't funded. It's an urgent, high priority project. I'm guessing the sheriff's office doesn't have it budgeted. Fernando said this is about what the cost was. I don't think they've gone through bidding yet. I don't know any of that yet, but that's a big ticket item I propose to put there. The McKinstry, that's a facilities condition proposal. It was the next step of looking at taking the facilities condition assessment for all of our buildings and doing the energy audit part of it. We've been holding on that contract in part for this discussion, as well as the situation with the roof that I've been describing to you. But that could come out of here and we could execute that anytime. The exhaust fan and the water heater are items that were in the building improvement fund for this year that came out of the facilities condition assessment. I didn't see any reason, given that we had a lot of funding in ARPA, to have those continue to be funded by 301, so I moved those over. Sean was looking for a new desk that had stand-up desk, thank you. But it was all built into the larger desk, and hers has been on blocks for quite some time. So if we're gonna do that, that's a good time to do it. I think you may be aware she had a leak in her floor. We have a contractor coming out, I think he already did, to look at what the cost for that might be. Perfect thing to pull out of ARPA. We've had the card access for treasurer's office and HR in the building improvement for a while. We were trying to get some grant funding for it. I didn't realize. They're still looking into it, but we've got the money. Maybe we just get that done. The indirect cost allocation software, there's a year 1 and year 2 cost here. There's 2 offices next to Justice Court to the north, adjacent to the north, that the DA is using. They were in really bad shape. This came up a couple of months ago, the flooring, the walls. They have a new person that is going to be coming in and is likely going to be occupying that office. So we took the opportunity to do a quick remodel, I guess, to that with carpeting. We had some leftover squares from the main remodel and painting, got rid of all the exterior, all the extraneous electrical work that continues to linger over time that wasn't necessary. So we did a big cleanup in there. That was about $8,000. Haven't got the bills yet for it. Could come out of ARPA. The troop job classification study, we have a contract for that. It's underway. It has been billed to the HR department, but we have the money. I would recommend all of that comes out of ARPA, and it's contracted for. Troop compensation requests, so there was no contract with Troop to do the compensation work for my position, Isabel's position, or any other position that may come up in the next couple of months that may warrant that work outside of the larger market study that's coming. So we're signing the contract for that, basically a retainer contract. That should come out of ARPA. I don't think we're going to spend the full 10, but it's there if we need it, because we have longer to spend it. So if we lock up the money, and if we don't need it, they could draw off of that contract in the market study if we end up going with Troop, or we could use their services for other work, like the leave admin that they're doing. So there's some flexibility there in the event we don't use the $10,000 for the contract work at hand. The compensation and pay equity study, I shared with you earlier that Troop gave us an estimate that is above the amount by which we can do a direct appoint. So I'm working on an RFP, but the amount could push up to $100,000. So I was conservative and put that there, but that should be contracted for by the end of the year. Mike has a balance on his contract, and I'm assuming we're going to carry forward with some of his work into next year. So signing the second contract with Mike. The Tiberius financial consultant work is $49,800. That's contracted for, and that could come out of here. In discussions I've had with you about the central services department structure, it would be great to have a PIO. It's unrealistic to have that be a full-time person, I think, at this point, but there's certainly needs from time to time to have someone do that. So I'd like to explore if this makes sense to you all, having a contractor do it, perhaps who Marlene is using with the health department. I've been talking with her about that. So we could do that. Several general fund departments have started purchasing copiers, and we've just purchased them, and I'm gonna pull the money out of contingency or other funds available within the department budgets, just knowing that it wasn't budgeted for, but in the long run, it is cheaper, more cost effective. But pulling those costs out of ARPA could help general fund departments. I did receive a request from one department, and I'm guessing others would also feel the same, special revenue fund departments, if we want to pay for copiers for them as well through this. I don't have the numbers here, but they are available if that's something you wanted to consider. So those are their GIS licenses. I was talking with Jeff about this in our one of our monthly meetings, that these costs are going up, and it's going to be a new program, and maybe there's a way to pre-purchase those licenses for multi-years, and we could just pay it up front. So I'm waiting on some numbers from him. That could be an eligible expense. The courthouse space assessment. So if we're ready to look at doing an assessment of space in the courthouse and proceed with plans in what that would look like long-term, that could be a sizable item. I would guess $50,000 to $100,000 or more. I could contract with DLR. I have a meeting with them on Thursday to talk through what that cost would be. If it's under 100, we could do a direct appoint with them. I've been talking with the incoming assessor about a renovation in the assessor side of tax and assessment, and I think we can do a renovation there that would make their footprint a lot more feasible for how they want their workflow. It would be a lot less intrusive than the DA remodel. It would mostly be blowing out a wall or two, paint, carpet, mostly cosmetic work. So I think we could do that. The renovation work itself would carry beyond the December deadline, but I think we could contract with DLR to do the design work of it, and then maybe out of this other funding, if it's something the board wanted to do, out of the interest funding. I don't know what the cost of the reno would be, or when that timeline would be, but the DA's renovation was $500,000. I think it was like $450,000. I would expect this to be half or less, but I won't know. I want to get a preliminary estimate from DLR on what they think that might be as well before we get too far down that road. So those are numbers I'll have in sooner than later. And then you see a white space because I just wanted to separate other projects that I just don't feel like we're going to have a good answer on, except for the Jensen intersection realignment. The financial assessment, I don't think it's realistic to have a contract in place. These are the funds that we may pull out of the interest funds. The financial assessment, contract software, that was a project you awarded. I have just never been able to get to it, and it is just not realistic for me to do that by the end of the year, calendar year. But ERP and contract software could come out of the interest funds. The biological opinion consultant support, that I know that's still up in the air. It could be important work, but I don't have any numbers for it, and I don't know if it's realistic to expect that would be contracted by the end of December. The courthouse roof repair, that is going through the CIS process now to see what, if anything, we can get from CIS. I don't expect an answer on that by the end of the year. And then if all else fails and we have several $100,000 that still need to be spent, I could put it toward the Jensen intersection realignment, contracting with Consor very quickly. And this is just what I'm aware of.
Thank you. So would you, what's the process that you're envisioning? Do you want us to be thinking about this? When do you want to start deliberating on these things? Do you want us to make more suggestions?
Hadn't really thought that through. I think if we could today come to, knowing that these numbers need more vetting, I think it would be very helpful for you today to deliberate on some things that are very obvious. The indirect cost allocation, the jail generator, McKinstry. I think some of these you're going to be an absolute yes on. I think it would be good to try to get through some of that today because they will need to be contracted for, and if we can get that because we only have a month and a half, I think that would be helpful. And then from there, maybe preliminary thoughts on things or other ideas you have right off the bat.
Great.
And then it's going to be fluid from there. But I think that would be a good starting point.
Having just come from the FEMA implementation meeting, I'm wondering, do the ARPA funds qualify for a contribution to the Oregonians for Floodplain Protection legal fund?
I'm guessing that's a lawsuit. I would say probably not. Sean?
I would say that might be considered lobbying and would not be an applicable expense for them.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll get some more information about that, but we're asking everyone else to contribute, so seems like it would be good if we can contribute in some.
But I think this is a lot of money so if you look at the list that I've just put in front of you, all of these things are things you want to do and are already in the works, and we're actually doing a shell game to shift them out of the general fund and pull from ARPA. So by doing that, you in theory would have money somewhere else that would.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we protect general fund money.
Okay. Do you want to just start?
I would just go.
Big Trout Bridge?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Could I make a suggestion on, when I've done these things before, not exactly like this, of course, but where I've had a list of dozen items or more, I've separated them A, B, C. And A is fire, life, safety, something that you absolutely have to do or should do or is a matter of urgency. And then B is a item that would increase efficiency or make the organization better. And then C is kind of if you have money left over, your wish list. I mean, that's just what I've used over the years when I built budgets and things. Is some things you really, really need to do or are compelled to do or under threat of who knows what. And then the next ones are ones that generate money back or save money or otherwise make good business sense. And then the third one, do it if you can afford it. So maybe something like that would help us at least on the first pass. Just a suggestion.
Thank you.
The sheriff has his hand up.
I had something to add too before you get.
You want to go first?
Oh, I was just gonna add along those lines, other things to keep in mind is the list I have does not fully exhaust the amount of money. There's still about $500,000 on the table. And that's if that doesn't include Sarah's 400,000, so it might be a lot more. So this makes a big dent, but there's still a lot to add to it. And in developing this list, it contemplates the timing of being able to complete the project. So,
Thank you.
So let's say you have a project and we say, yes, it's a go. And then you get into March or April and find that it can't be done or shouldn't be done, or there's some reason it can't. What happens then? Can you substitute another one in place, or what happens to
no,
that?
that's my exact point. That's why these projects, the only projects I'm recommending to you are projects that at this point in time, and there's more vetting to do, I believe can be contracted for by the end of this December and can be spent by the time the ARPA funds need to be spent. And that includes a contracting process. So you could tell me, Rachel, go buy the BLM building, and I would tell you, I can't because I don't have time to do it. Not because I don't have capacity, but there's just not enough time for that process to occur. So I'm sure there's a lot of great ideas, but the biggest thing to think of is if it can actually be done in the timelines that we have before us.
It's basically use it or lose it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so being very conservative, I mean, the numbers there were other projects, the HVAC project, I wanted to put that in there, but can I contract for that by the end of December? I don't think so. And what's the cost? Is it even going to be enough to cover it, not knowing what those timelines are? Because we don't want to lose money. I would rather put projects in that might not be the top of our list, but they are important, and we know we're not going to waste the money.
Sheriff.
So I just have some questions. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Looking at the documents, I can kind of understand that. I was trying to track some of the projects that Rachel was suggesting. It sounded like maybe she's talked with a few other department heads about some of these projects. And I apologize if I haven't been talked to, so maybe some of my staff has. It sounds like maybe Lieutenant Silvera was briefed on this because of the generator. Maybe that's on the list, which I am very happy about that. So if there is money left to be allocated and, county departments are going to be able to take advantage of using it, I would love to be able to, give my 2 cents worth on what could be benefited from here. I understand and probably agree with that this is not necessarily like a, wish list, let's just start spending money kind of a thing. And I believe that maybe there's a possibility, and this is kind of where my question gets into it. Could we use some of this to help offset some of the general fund shortages? For example, and this would be question number 1, is in the paperwork you sent, Rachel, the courthouse improvements, interior lighting got upped, increased from 28,000 award, and it specifically says to offset 301. So now 301 is technically a special revenue, but it's used for different things. But if we're using ARPA to offset one of our other budget line items, could we do the same thing with general fund? Example being, can I buy my patrol vehicles that were allotted to us this year and pay for the upfitting with ARPA funds, which in turn would give, $100,000 or whatever it is, relief to the general fund? Because if that's a possibility and then it softens the general fund a little bit, I would love to be able to give my input on some of that stuff. So that's kind of what I'm asking is, couldn't we focus maybe on some things like that in addition to these other projects that Rachel suggested that are either in motion or, viable options? And at what point could I or other department heads have input into that? That's kind of my questions. And does the 301, it says to offset 301, does that benefit the general fund or projects coming out of the 301 in any way if we're offsetting, like it says on the document? So those would be my questions.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Yes, those are great questions, Josh. So I think the answer to everything you just said is yes. I will tell you, I have, over the last year, probably, as project ideas have come up that we haven't gotten to the point of implementing yet, I wrote them on the ARPA sheet. So, because I knew this day was gonna come. And so the list before you, that I am starting with the recommendation are projects that I have heard that are across departments. They are mostly supporting general fund departments or the general fund in general. I have not talked to any departments specifically except for ones that already had projects on the list that I was clarifying the status of. I knew of the jail generator not being funded, so I called Fernando and got an update on that. I didn't, and this all literally just happened today because I haven't had time to work on it yet, and I needed to get it in front of you. I expected that if there was a balance of project, let me back up. So it also includes projects that are planned, some of these were in the budget, Fund 301, and are high priority projects that are underway or have been on the back burner. And so I just moved those forward, assuming that you would want to offset the general fund cost by paying them out of ARPA, like the job classification study. So that's where the original list came from. I didn't know what the balance was going to be for what was left to identify projects for, and haven't had a chance to reconcile that with what other ideas are out there. I fully expect that out of today will be Rachel go talk to everybody, or people start sending projects to Rachel, and there's going to be more vetting. So leadership will absolutely have an opportunity to weigh in on these projects. Yes, Josh, the goal is to offset the general fund costs, which, as I said, is one of the priority, which was part of the lens that I used in identifying these projects. 301 is not a special, I guess it is a special revenue fund, but it's actually subsidized by the general fund. So anything that is in 301 that we are offsetting offsets the general fund costs. And yes, I think your vehicles could come out of this, provided we can have a contract in place by the end of December. And if we don't have a contract in place by the end of December, it could potentially come out of the interest funds. Did I answer all your questions?
Yes, pretty much. So 301 is offset by general fund. So if we're offsetting it with ARPA, technically you're not having to pull from general fund and put it into 301, therefore saving money from the general fund. Is that
exactly
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I think Under Sheriff Kelly is working on ordering the vehicles. I think he's on here. So we may actually be at a place where getting a contract signed is very feasible. I don't know what kind of contract is needed for the upfitting, because that in and of itself is another 30 to 35,000 for 2 vehicles, which is what we're working on. But if I know that that's something we can do as of today, I can have a conversation with Matt and try to get the ball rolling on those. Because then that saves that chunk of money out of our general fund, a regular budget. So it kind of balances it out. I
think we have a retainer contract for the upfitting.
We probably do, because we use the same company. Another question is transitional housing. This came from Lieutenant Seaholm. She has a hard time finding housing for some of the clientele. I believe there's some other interest. Is that something that ARPA money could pay for?
Don't know.
Could the county buy transitional housing or somehow loop that in? I mean, is that outside of the realm? And then that actually gives a couple of different agencies, not just the sheriff's office, some resources that are sorely needed in this community.
So you mean buy the actual house, not pay for hotel rooms and
rent?
Well, that's already what's going on. But, for example, there's those apartments that are over catty corner from fire department, I guess they're in town. We'd have to have, some type of a management company. But if we or the county, if the county owned those, either in some sort of partnership, then it can become transitional housing. This is something that Ani is just kind of greasing the wheels with me a little bit So, I mean, the biggest question would be is could the county use ARPA funds to buy housing that can be used for transitional needs?
How about it in the time provided? Although I guess if you had it under,
Well, time provided might be difficult, certainly getting a contract by the end of the year.
It
You know,
would
but
Yeah, it would seem that we could, because I mean, really, I would think as far as ARPA funds and the auditors are concerned, we're buying an asset, we're buying property. I don't
correct.
know if it matters what we're using it for, but that's an auditor question.
Ed Gallagher and I learned in the NOHA meeting last Thursday that the Pine Avenue Apartments in Tillamook may soon become available. It's a fourplex. And it may be available entirely, or they may sell them off each. They may sell four.
Well, yeah, I know the apartments that I'm talking about are the ones, they're southwest by a block of the Tillamook Fire Department. I forget what they're called.
The Buell
Um,
Apartments.
Thank you, Buell Apartments. It's good to have people that are smarter than you around, and that's where Matt's on here and Ani's on here. But anyways, I think they were for sale for less than $1 million. I know Ani, and again, if I say something that's not necessarily too true, correct me, but I believe she had some funds that could be available to help pay for it. It could be something utilized by TFCC. There's a lot of different options for it, so it wouldn't necessarily be the full amount, but I don't know if it's still for sale, but it was something that her and I briefly talked about. So if there could be a partnership and then being able to utilize that as for the transitional housing, there's absolutely a need in this community for that. So it could be beneficial for the community if we did something like that, and knowing that maybe it's a possibility. If the board's willing to consider it, then I can see what Ani can find out.
Well, it's a very interesting idea. I feel a little daunted by the time frame, but I don't, more information is certainly welcome.
yeah, I'd be a little daunted by the building. It is
I
the
don't know
old
that
Tillamook Hospital. The blue one, I think, is what they're talking
Oh.
about, the Buell.
Okay.
It has been in very, very, very poor disrepair for many, many, many years. So unless somebody has purchased it and fully upgraded it, I would be very concerned about what we might be getting into, but it may have been
And-
upgraded by now.
And they have updated it. It's almost all the apartments, I believe, have been fully renovated.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So in the interest of time, I know we have a 4 o'clock. I don't know how much vetting into each we want to get. I was just kind of maybe hoping to get the low-hanging fruit, which may be presumptuous, but
I don't think it's
Whatever you would like to-
presumptuous
okay.
from my perspective, and I will call you, Paul, just a second. From my perspective, everything you listed are things we've already talked about and we already know we need. So if those can come out of this fund, I'm supportive of every one of them.
Yeah, and I would agree.
okay.
And I know that there was a question about a copier for special revenue, and that Marlene brought that up because apparently when we shifted copier companies, their copiers that they already have that are 5 years old or more do not have maintenance agreements anymore because they're old. And so it's put the special revenue funds potentially in a place where they are being kind of required to replace their copiers, even though not budgeted. And I don't know if I didn't get a chance to check that with Jeff to say, is that true? Did that happen to people? Have we left people with no maintenance agreements? In which case, I think while we would not typically look at special revenue funds, I think it's something, if that in fact is the case, it might be worth looking at least a partial for each of them to be aware that we, through our agreement, kind of pushed them into a $8,000 expenditure they weren't expecting.
Okay, I'll get those numbers.
Paul?
I guess I just want to make sure, maybe I'm just confused here. I would just implore, I understand financing these things as you guys are describing, but we keep, isn't there a way for us to move some of this money around so we don't keep hearing about, or some way of backfilling for the timber shortfall? I mean, I feel like we're talking about maybe losing some of this money, but is it not possible to use some of this money to backfill general fund money that's already been spent? Like if a department already bought a car, can we not backfill that expense so at the end of the year, the indirect cost allocation goes higher so that we're not doom and gloom every single meeting about the shortfall. If we have money here that we could be using in addition to the Christmas list, do we not have a responsibility to use that money to pay for that projected shortfall that we're, and does the finance consultants aware that we have this? Well, the time frame we'll be running on a time frame, but I just feel like I'm not hearing, or maybe I'm not understanding how we're not using some of this to offset that dire prediction that we keep listening about. And I'll let it go because I know you guys are running out of time.
I appreciate that comment and that question, and Sean perhaps can answer for us whether or not we can use it on things purchases we've already made or money we've already spent. And if we could move it all into the general fund to shore up our shortfall, I would, but we can't use it on personnel. Sean?
Correct. So there's no way to actually just move the funds into the general fund. Rachel's done a really good outline of general fund projects that could be completed using the funds and contracts in place before the end of the fiscal or calendar year. I would caution on the housing. That's a long-term expense that if we're already shortfall in the general fund now, we'd still have that ongoing expense in the future.
Thank you. And what about paying for things we've already purchased or already done?
I will look into that. My only question is whether they cross a fiscal year or not. So I'll ask the auditors because I had one other question about ARPA funds to ask them also.
Thank you. Please do. Good
So-
suggestion, Paul.
Yeah, so sorry if I'm not clear. I think the purpose of this is absolutely to offset the general fund, and 90% of the things on this list are things that we're already doing right now that I have a contract for, or they're planned to do in this fiscal year. So I think we literally are offsetting the general fund, and I think we can do general ledger entries to change how things have been charged. One example is the job classification study with the troop. That's currently being charged to HR. I'm proposing that the bills that we've already received get adjusted to come out of ARPA.
Good. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because they would come out of the general fund. And Chris?
Low hanging fruit, kids, Kilchis House, bridge beams and big trout. Approximately 4 to 5 weeks, I'll get some invoices totaling about $690,000. So this would be a great one. It's pretty simple. Kilchis is funded. Big Trout is funded. It's just where the money's coming from. So that's a fairly low hanging fruit. So as you deliberate, moving that would make a lot of sense. Big Trout's under contract. Kilchis won't go under contract until maybe February or March.
Okay, and the bridge beams?
We've purchased bridge beams previously. So the about $89,000 thereabouts is not actually needed for the bridge beams. Certainly we can buy more bridge beams. We would have to add more road department funds in order to make up the next set. So we've already spent, I don't know off the top of my head, 240,000, we've already spent $168,000 out of the allocated 250,000, giving us a balance of 81,000. So we've already used a portion of the award for bridge beams. So the remainder portion, which would go to Kilchis House, or we could dump it into Big Trout. That money would also be set aside for Kilchis House, depending if the Big Trout gets funded through ARPA. So we would set that money aside. All the ARPA money that would be used would be switched to Kilchis House in the 308 fund.
All right, thank you.
The GIS licenses.
Do we,
I'm just seeing if there's any other low-hanging fruit.
And are there other computer equipment purchases that we have done or need to do that ARPA would do for us? Because if I remember correctly, we kind of, when the first tranche of ARPA came, we got a lot of stuff, and now we're into the second. So I don't know if that would be more important or trump, the GIS licenses. But GIS licenses are something we pay for regularly anyway, right?
Right.
And they tend to be general fund departments.
yeah, I think so.
The courthouse space assessment.
I say yes.
Yeah, we need to do that. I mean, in light of the fact that we are not moving forward with the BLM building, we now have to figure out how we're going to continue to survive in the sardine can that we're in.
And the assessor reno design.
Sure.
Yeah, if you've been
Maybe
in,
we could fold that into the DLR contract.
I'd prefer to keep them separate for procurement,
Okay.
and they are separate. Okay, so that is a great start. From there, how do you want to try to populate the rest?
I like the idea and completely agree with the idea of looking at what has been purchased in this fiscal year. If there are things where we are able to play that sort of shell game and have this reserve general fund to the greatest extent possible will buy us time in the next few years. So I think that's a really valuable piece to look at. So I think that going back to that is key.
Sean, is that something that you can do, is look at, however, it might just be this fiscal year?
Would probably be this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking at what's been spent
Well,
this fiscal year so far that we could do a journal entry for?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
I'm guessing that will hopefully take up the rest of the money. Okay, and then do you want to hold off on just looking at other projects, or do you want to?
I think it's reasonable for leaders to send their suggestions to you.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Did you have something, Doug?
No, I don't think so. I think, we're not there yet, but, free money from the government, so to speak, use it. But I don't see anything on this list that wouldn't have been somewhat of a priority to start with, simply because it needs to get done. And I also don't see some other capital stuff that I'm aware of that's on the list at all. There's still, the issue of court space is not on this list. I mean, big time, the big, long term.
You can't,
The courthouse space assessment is on the list.
Yeah, but I'm talking if there had to be another building or something.
And I think the space assessment will help us
Yes. no,
affirm.
I agree with that, but there's still capital stuff down the road is my point.
yeah, that won't be ready by the end of December is our trick.
Oh, I know, I understand that. And this is a powerful list.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got a pretty good handle on it and a wonderful start, and it'd be nice to have a little more time, but it's one of those things where I don't see anything on here that won't come up as somewhat of a priority in the next year or two anyway, so get it done.
Agreed.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this for right now? Okay. Well, I will invite our friends from NCRD to come up. I apologize I sent them an email earlier and said, oh, maybe we'll be done by 3:30. So they came early. I'm sorry. I was mistaken about that. I'm glad to see you in person.
If you have extra ARPA money, I know of a project that'll definitely have a contract ready for approval before December 31st.
Thank you.
Well, we're back.
Okay.
We're like gremlins. We're back.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
Nice to see you again.
Let me. Oh wait, hang on. I'm supposed to share screens. Okay, thank you for your time once again. I'm Michael House, the board chair at NCRD, here with Mary Gallagher and Barbara McCann, our executive director. Before we get into, so as of the last meeting, you asked us to do a little homework on finance options, like a line of credit, et cetera, and we have some preliminary info to share. I'm not sure if you've seen the slides ahead of time. We didn't get them out until Sunday, but we were kind of reflecting on the tone of the last meeting And it kind of occurred to us that maybe there's a concern about setting precedent with this decision. You know, this is kind of an odd, out of the blue ask, perhaps. And so we put together a slide that talks about the idea of precedent, and maybe it isn't necessarily such a bad thing given our project. So if the commissioners were concerned about precedent, or perhaps like maybe it opens floodgates or it creates chaos, becomes untenable, totally get it. Like I've run organizations before where I always thought about what precedent am I setting and making a decision or not making one. One consideration could be, and I'm not trying to encourage how you guys should think, it was just a thought looking through the facts of our project versus others that might come down the pipeline. Maybe it's a good precedent to set for future requests, since this could be the first one for this budget category. If you look at certain categories, and we kind of did a rating, and admittedly we're a bit biased, but the project maturity of our project is quite high. We've already self-funded over 85, 88% of the project. Financial risk, we believe is low. Commissioner Olson, you had asked about cash flow surplus, operation expenses after the fact. And while the activation plan for the new aquatic center is still ongoing, that'll give us a good look at all the operational expenses. Mary and I looked at the cash flow surplus for the last 3 years, and there's an average surplus of about $300,000. We expect in some rough estimates that we would continue to see that surplus, although a bit lower, with the new aquatic center online. And that accounted for some assumptions on staffing that we've already baked into our budget, and some rough assumptions on operation expenses. Time to completion is short. We could see community benefit as early as June, assuming things move forward. The impact on unincorporated areas could be a category to consider, and as we talked about last week, over 60% of our tax-paying properties are unincorporated, mine included. Community support is significant. I think what's telling here, you probably all have heard this before, our general obligation bond passed in 2020 with almost 60% approval. Our 5-year option tax passed last year with 68%, just showing strong community support. And then there's the significant number of individual donations for the project that we talked about last week as well, mostly from the community. And the last one, I think is kind of the most important. There's this community impact, which I would say is significant. NCRD, we believe, is one of the most important community hubs in the county, definitely in the North County. In addition to the aquatics program that we've been talking about, which does literally save lives, NCRD's fitness center, pickleball courts, baseball field, youth care programs, which I think they're the only youth care programs in the North County of that nature, performing arts center, et cetera, they're enjoyed by residents of all ages and abilities, and visitors alike. So that was our kind of thought on whether this sort of I don't know if this helps your line of thinking or not, but we thought it might be worth putting it together and sharing. I also don't know that Nan Devlin was able to come. I believe she had put this project towards the top of one of her prioritized lists of projects of importance for the county, or at least the North County. And I'm somewhat new to the county, only about 2.5 years here, but I'll just go on a limb here and just say it anyway. I've noticed in the community, I don't know if it's true or where it comes from, but I've noticed a sentiment that kind of implies that there's inequity of how dollars might be spent in North County versus South County. Again, I don't know if it's true. I don't know where it came from. I just know that I hear that a lot in the community, not just within NCRD, but from neighbors, et cetera. And if that sentiment is indeed like it does exist, this funding a project like ours could go a long way towards shifting that sentiment if that were desirable. So now that all that's out of the bag, let's talk finance options, unless you have any questions on the previous slide. Okay. Wasn't sure if there'd be any or lots. So since our last meeting, we were able to get a updated letter of interest or / term sheet from Oregon Coast Bank, who had been in discussions with in the past. We had some previous discussions with some institutions. We could look at that data, and we met with another local bank. And as you can appreciate, the process of getting a line of credit could be lengthy, especially for a project of our size, and our organization being a public government type of organization. My guess is it would probably take 6 to 8 weeks, if not longer, to secure a line of credit. to where we could start drawing from it. But that aside, we did some calculations based on a 7% interest rate and a 5-year payoff term. I know we'd mentioned 5% last week. When we dug into the details more and saw the updated term sheet, there's some strings attached to that number that we're a little bit uncomfortable with and didn't want to promise something that we don't think is achievable. For example, we want to have to move all of our deposits, we have to move our cash reserves to that institution, and those are things we need to talk about as a board and discuss with our legal counsel. So the 7% interest rate, 5-year payoff term is what we used for the following chart. So if we look at options, again, our primary preferred option, again, is really great when you think of interest rates, because there isn't one. It's just a cash allocation for the $2 million to the Aquatic Center. So you're not spending any tax dollars on interest, and it's very clean. You don't have to have any more of those very challenging discussions like we just heard before the meeting. It's always hard to figure out where to put money. A different option, though, if that the large allocation isn't desirable, is an option that provides a large cash infusion up front. This unblocks our phase 3 that we had talked about, that we're have the schedule crunch for. So maybe it's a 75-25 where there's $1.5 million cash allocation, and then there's a some kind of promise to service debt up to $500K. The annual payments would be roughly $120,000. We have $119,000 per year, given that 7% and 5-year payoff terms. Now, again, one thing I should note, if you see the little line item at the bottom, we have to really discuss this as a board and take a board motion to get to the point where we actually have a term sheet and a loan that's being underwritten. That's part of the agenda for our tomorrow evening board meeting. And one note on option 2 here is that it should allow us to, I say should, because we need to vet this with the project management team and the rest of the board and the pool team. We believe this should allow us to proceed with phase 3 while we continue to fundraise and secure a line of credit. And we would hope to not draw on that line of credit unless absolutely necessary. So we still have irons in the fire from a fundraising point of view. And the hope is that, we would proceed in parallel with the project continuing forward due to the cash infusion, and then put the work in to get this line of credit secured, working with you guys to help secure that. But ideally, we might have some fundraising success and not need it, would be the hope. So that's all we have in terms of slides today. Clearly, we chose a 75-25 split for this finance option, since that allows us to unblock, to keep the project on schedule and avoid incurring cost rises based on pausing the project. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have or comments.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Well, I did, after our last meeting a week or two ago, I started thinking about this, and then when I got this, which is the same as you have on the screen, I thought about it some more, and I also have talked to a couple of people, and so I have a proposal that I'll just put on the table, and obviously it can go somewhere or not. But I will say, before I tell you what it is, of all the projects I've seen over the years through the grant processes and other things, you have a wonderful project, no question about that, and you enjoy absolute community support and success. Now, so that's all the good part. So what the only part of what you're asking, what troubles me a bit, we touched on the last time around, was there's a lot of other projects in one stage or another across the county, and I can't tell you what they are, but every time the funding opens up, there are people standing in line. Some of them make a lot of sense, some don't. There are projects that come through the TLT. There are other smaller projects that go through the Tillamook PUD grant process annually, and I think there are others as well. So I'm wondering how much good we could do with money spread around a little more. So here's what I was thinking, and I would vote in favor of, but it's obviously you got to have another vote. If we issued out of the TLT funds $500,000, write you a check, not this afternoon, but soon, then the county guarantees over the next 5 years, debt service on another 500,000 for a total of 1 million. And that would be, as you point out, and I did the math on it too, roughly about 118,600 a year at 6%, if you could get money. But let's say 120,000 a year, the county would commit to that over TLT funds in 5 years. And so you could borrow against that. You could take that to the bank literally, and you'd have $1 million. That leaves you $1 million short. And I'm uncomfortable with giving $2 million for my part in this, which is only 33.33%, without going through some sort of a process and seeing what else has bubbled up across the county. And I can't, I don't believe that there would be a shortage of worthwhile projects, because every time there's a notice that goes out, regardless of the source, people say, yes, we've been waiting for this. We've got a baseball dugout, so we've got a field for this, or we've got a shelter that needs attention here, and the list goes on. And some of them are rather modest, at $10,000 or $20,000, and others are considerably more. But there's a lot of good we can do with this. And keep in mind, if this is TLT funds, it has to be related in some fashion to tourism, which you are, but you also serve an awful lot of locals. So I guess to just summarize what I'm saying, I could support half of it, with half of that being a note over 5 years that the county would guarantee. So that means the bank would issue a check for $1 million. And then we'd repay that out of the TLT funds, and you'd be on the hook then for the other $1 million. But you could go back to your community, which supports you, as you pointed out, and say, okay, we got $1 million out of the county. We need just a bit more, 750,000 or something over some period of time to make it work. So they'd have some more skin in the game. You've already got 80% of skin in the game, but some of that was borrowed funds because of a bond, and I understand how all that came together. But I'm uncomfortable writing or suggesting that we do a $2 million check. But I can see a way to do 25% of them immediately, another 25% with a guarantee, and then kick it back over to you and your wonderful community to come up with the rest. That's just where I am today after thinking about the entire county that's, 75 miles long and 40 miles wide.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you want to respond? Chuck?
I'd like to hear what the other commissioners have to say as well.
Yeah, so I share the struggle of writing a $2 million check without having process, which I shared last week. And I was hoping that you all would be able to come back and say, here's the amount we can borrow, and it would bring us closer to something that felt comfortable. But what I'm hearing is that you actually are, even if you're borrower, you're still looking for us to pay it back for you. So you're still looking for $2 million. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct, yes, especially given the debt we've already incurred for the project and our cash flow, knowing that that's going to go down when the new building comes online. It should still be a cash flow surplus, but it's correct. Your question is correct.
Okay, and remind me what the debt is you already have on the project, the amount?
Is it three?
It's 3.25 million
Yeah, there's a full faith and credit obligation.
at 3%.
At 3%. So we're servicing this year, it's $194,000 and change. And I believe, correct me if I'm mistaken, Mary, we've generally used the timber tax revenue to offset that, which we know can fluctuate, but unfortunately the FF&C obligation won't fluctuate. So yeah, we're already paying close to $200,000 a year through 2045.
Okay. And the minimum that gets your contractor to the table is 2 million?
For phase 3, now I wasn't in the full construction meeting yesterday. We'll get an update tomorrow. I don't know if you have a number in mind, Mary. I was thinking it's 1.5 to 1.75. That somewhere in that range is the number that we're going to hear tomorrow about the phase 3 obligation. Yeah.
That keeps the project going.
Yeah, we don't feel like it would be, well, I don't even know if we legally could, if we wanted to even, but signing a contract for knowing that it's, let's say $1.5 million and signing that contract to move forward if we only have $1 million in hand. So that would most likely result in some kind of a delay while while we look for options, which would probably be a multifaceted approach, which we're still fundraising on all fronts as much as we can. Just we've been at it for quite a while.
No, you have, and you have raised an immense amount of money in a very small community. So I mean, I do want to honor that. It's not that I don't think you have done a fabulous job. It's not that I don't think you all have really used every resource that's at your disposal. And I completely understand why you're asking us. It just feels like for us to write a $2 million check without process is hard for me to feel like I could answer to the constituents who come to me and said, how did you decide? Well, they came and asked. You know what I mean? And so I appreciate your slide on precedent. I got that. I hear that you all have done a lot of work to set the bar high, but I do struggle as government to not have process. So that's still where I'm sort of sifting and sitting. So I appreciate the suggestion that Commissioner Bell brought last time about what if we could pay the debt. What Commissioner Olson's brought this time about, how about, a payment here and debt there, and I'm trying to see if there's some other way to structure that it doesn't end up for us writing the full check.
Is it from the last meeting, I thought I recalled some kind of statement that this particular group of TLT funds was set aside, kind of seemed like it set aside as a process such that if something comes up, be it a very spicy property that's interesting for the county or an aquatic center up north, then those funds could be spent. I thought I heard that a process didn't necessarily need to be created for this particular request. I could have not heard that correct.
Technically, it does not.
Yeah.
Defensively, what we do with the budget is we say, these are the things that we know that we've committed to, and this is what we haven't. And then typically it's the opportunity to go back and say, so what do we want to do with this? But in the last 2 years or 3 years that I've been here, we haven't had anything to go back and look at.
Right.
So we haven't had that process to say in my time, hey, here's the thing that we want to do, right? So I'm struggling with that because for me, this is a new piece of it. I came on board as the Jensen property was being purchased with the money that had specifically been saved for a county-based project. And then we did the parking lot again in my time, which was a county-based project with what was left. So I think in my mind, that's sort of where that extra money goes. And this is just, I've only been here 4 years. So, so I'm looking at history and looking at process and finding myself saying, well, wait a minute, are we creating something? Should we be creating something? And is this the right approach for us? So that's just my struggle. And again, I had hoped that you all would be able to come back and say, we're excited we can get this, and for $200,000 a year, for the next 10 years or whatever it needed to be, we can make this work. And so we're not there. So I'm still processing as to, is there a push-pull way to not drain everything we have and get you where you need to be?
Yeah.
Could I say something?
Yes.
We're asking you to do something completely unique. And that's what you're saying. And I think that our project is completely unique. I don't think there's anything like it anywhere in the county, maybe not even in the state, because first of all, it's going to be the premier tourist attraction in North County. There's nothing that has an aquatic center, a performing arts center, a brand new pickleball court. I mean, we check every box. And then the wellness factor that we bring to the community. I mean, we're all about health. We're serving every age group from infants through seniors. We're mission driven. We were, from the beginning, that little pool was built because there was a local drowning to save lives. And all these years since 1930, we've been teaching kids to swim to save lives. And then when the pool was going to close in 95, we were mission driven again. NCRD was formed to continue that mission of saving lives. And we have enhanced that program to the point where it is like nothing else in terms of water safety and swim education. And then this summer, we had a local drowning. We had one of our students here screams coming from the river that he lives on. And he just panicked. Like, first he thought it was his little sister. And he ran to see where his little sister was and saw she was safe. And the screams were still coming from the river. And he ran down to the river and he saw a woman literally going under in distress. His first instinct, he said, was to go get her. But he said the little voice in his head went off and it was his swim instructor. And he could hear Miss Sue saying, "You never go in after your victim." He said he was never so scared in his whole life. I interviewed him myself. And there he was, and then he found a big stick, a really long limb, and he did the reach and assist that he was taught. And the whole time he said he was never so scared in his life. And he pulled that woman to safety. He saved a life. And we have pictures of him with her swim instructor when he came to do the interview, and he was swimming in our pool from a young child, and here he is, a freshman in high school, and all those skills led to that moment. And it's not the first time. And so we're asking you to do something so unique, but we are so unique. There is nothing like us. Even we had health inspectors come to us and say, that old pool doesn't meet codes. We're going to shut you down. To a new inspector from the Tillamook Health Department once. And I was like, well, we're grandfathered in. And he says, well, I think it's time to put the old grandfather to bed. And we're like, no, it's not about the pool, it's about the program. And then we had the state health inspector come and say, they are grandfathered in. And he said, as long as you guys are earnestly moving towards replacing that old pool, and you can pass health inspections, we are with you, because there's nothing like you in the state. And so, yeah, we're asking you to do something really unique, but I don't think there's anything really like us. And it's mission driven. We are serving literally seniors, infants, health, safety, childcare, arts. We got it totally covered. So, but I will say, that's so generous of you, and I thank you so much, because for you to even offer that shows that you understand. And so whatever you decide to give us, we are thankful for. But please be able to make a unique decision for a very unique mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Barb.
Well, my only response to that is, boy, I think you hit the nail on the head. However, what I said earlier is, you may be the superior game in town, but there are others, and we represent 28,000 people, and I don't know how many different programs and things, and so to put that much money in one fell swoop, I'm very uncomfortable with that, and I would agree with Commissioner Scar that to do this is a process, and I haven't seen a process for this. I've seen lots of the grants processes over the years, and they work, sometimes with flawed, but they do work. And we haven't done that with this, but I'm willing, because of what you told us before and right now, to at least for my part, and keep in mind, I'm 1/3. I could see giving you what amounts to $1 million, meaning you get a check, and then the rest would be from the bank, and then you would have to find the other million, which you could tell your constituents that you went to the county one afternoon and they came back with $1 million. That's not a bad story to
Oh,
tell.
that's a wonderful
And,
story.
and I'm thinking somebody in your end of the county, or all those people who've supported you in the past, and you have marvelous support, I would say, okay, we'll come up with the rest. We'll come so darn close and make it work. So, but the process, again, government is by design process oriented, and I learned that many, many, many years ago. This is not a kingdom, and it's not dictatorship. We answer to an awful lot of people, and they're going to say, "Why did you give 2 million of them? You didn't even ask us for what we wanted," and I'm uncomfortable with that. But I think there's a part of that can make this happen. So I'll stop talking, and that's where I am.
Anything else for you?
No, I sit where Doug sits. I don't know you know, with the numbers, I'm willing to consider and think about it. And I guess I would love it if your board was ready to tell us what they could do, which sounds like it happens tonight or tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. So I know it's hard because we keep pushing this out, right? But without complete information, that's the other thing that's a difficult decision to make, is we're making that based on the assumption, if we were to go with, let's say, option 2, we're going on the assumption that your board is willing to and capable of doing that. Otherwise, it doesn't matter because we're not going to be enough, right? So I guess I would love to have complete information. And I know this is difficult because we're all headed to the conference next week, and you have till December 13th. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the current estimate from the project team. I don't know if you have thoughts. So no, I think this is a really great dialogue. I mean, the complete information I think you're referring to, like, to be blunt, we're already $3.25 million, $3.5 million in debt for this project. I don't see a scenario where the board is going to approve. I don't even know if we would get approval for the full $2 million, let's say, or $1 million like bridge loan. Maybe we could do it, but the payments alone on that would just eat up our cash flow surplus. So that's why we presented this option. The $1 million in totality that you're referring to, Commissioner Olson, is fantastic. $1.5 million would be so much better, just because I believe that number, if that's a number that we could depend on, I believe we could keep the project going into phase 3 while I think they say in The Godfather, going to the mattresses, so to speak, to get the rest of the funds on our own. Anyway, that's my take. Commissioner Bowden, if you have thoughts or comments.
I also appreciate this conversation. I think that the project is entirely worthy, and I really appreciate Barbara's impassioned story. Thank you for sharing that. I hadn't heard that story about the young man and the stick in the river. I heard about the person who died at the river, but I
Yeah,
hadn't
the
heard
husband.
that story. Yeah. So thank you for sharing.
This was Luke Scoville, local kid. Yeah.
So I very much, I think that, I'm not speaking for my fellow commissioners, but I think we would all like to do something and we're not sure what. I very much appreciate Doug's proposal and offer, and so, you know, so we're on the path for sure. So I think what I would like to ask for is, I'd like to ask Rachel to put together some options for us. So including Doug's suggestion and suggestion that reflects 1.5, and something, I mean, you know, if Rachel puts together a package of options for us, that would include nothing, you know, like, what are all our options in this situation? And I'd like to ask for your board to come up with more information for the next time we meet, which could be the 27th. We don't have any meetings and we're out of town next week, but we'll be back the 27th. So if that could be, you know, if to Michael's current request or last request, you know, if we dedicated 500,000 now and $1 million in future support for debt service, so 1.5, and it looks like, based on these numbers, that the debt service for 500,000 would be 120-ish.
Yeah, for $1 million, it would be about 238.
Right. So, you know, if we committed the 238 per year for 5 years for that debt service,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, I would be willing to start the conversation to consider that. I can't speak for how we all would vote, but at least we know that now we've gotten to $1 million vote, and maybe that's the best we can do. But I think we'd like some more information and a list of possibilities, possible actions, and then we can take it up again in 2 weeks. How's that?
Sounds
I-
good. Those are
Thank you.
good options.
Yes, no,
Yes.
definitely are. Thank you very much. I'm wondering, would it make sense for us to come back during a briefing or a regular session? I don't know if it's a thing. I'd like to not have to come back again. I love coming down here. I love seeing the lovely faces. But it's more, how far down the road the proverbial can gets kicked that I'm thinking of in the back of my head. But yeah, we appreciate your support, and we'd love to think that we can count on you guys to help us here. I recognize that it's an uncomfortable ask. It's uncomfortable to ask as well.
Right. And you guys are doing an amazing job of that, just so you know. And Barbara, I mean, that was very, very heartfelt, and I felt it in my heart. It is amazing what that program has done and what it serves in your community. So
Thank you.
please know that it doesn't fall on deaf ears.
Thank you.
It does not.
Just to recap the options that I heard from this session, and so we're clear going forward to our board.
Session
And,
tomorrow.
is, Doug Olson had $500,000 cash up front, and then a guarantee on a $500,000 loan, 6%, 5 years. And then Mary Faith, Commissioner Rappel, you said that you thought 500,000 up front and maybe $1 million loan, probably on a 5-year payout, which would be about 238. So those are the options I heard. Are there any other options? There's nothing. I heard nothing
No,
too.
and I think it's part of it is what, could you do better with a 10-year loan? And it's that's the buyout. It's kind of that, where are the best, terms and deals that we can kind of spread that cash. And if it's 5 years, great. If it's 10 years is better, great.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not an expert in debt service or loan underwriting, clearly. But if what I'm hearing is that the county would be willing to, for lack of a better term, be the guarantor, for the loan, if that makes sense. What I'm wondering is if that's something we can, kind of glancing over at Rachel, if that's something that we would have a letter or be able to work with the debt provider, so let's say Oregon Coast Bank or our local bank, such that the collateral and the guarantees coming from the county, that might actually dramatically expedite the path to getting the line of credit.
That's exactly what I had in mind. The county would give you, if the one I discussed, you'd get a check for $500,000
Yep.
walking out the door of the courthouse. Not, we'd have to do it, not today.
Yeah.
You
Or
would have to
750,
do this
whatever.
at a formal, and maybe it wouldn't be that quick here. Rachel's giving me the evil eye here.
Just listening.
So we would,
Shots
in a
still on
formal meeting, approve the concept. And at that point, then you would become a payable for the county, and you would be receivable for you for $500,000. So on our usual cycle, you would get a check for $500,000 out of our TLT fund. Then the county would issue separately, based on the majority action of this board, a guarantee, a letter that you could literally take to the bank. They would likely advance you another $500,000 because they know the money would be either repaid to the bank or to you. And I think my preference would be to you, we would guarantee you'd have the funds. Now, if you did something else with them, that would be your problem because you'd be on the note with the bank, not the county.
Yeah, no, that's,
And then the remaining $1 million would be your issue to work through your board and your supporters and come up with. But that's just what I'm thinking. So
okay.
you wouldn't get, the county wouldn't be paying the loan. The county would guarantee something that you would arrange. That's how I
Okay.
picture this for my part.
Well, hang on, can you clarify that last? So the county guarantee something that we arrange, I get that. But the county is servicing the debt. So do we?
They're reimbursing us for the debt.
We would
I
reimburse you.
wouldn't see the county being in any agreement that you have with the bank. We would give you an agreement with us, whatever
Along
style of document it is, that says we will give you $238,000 a year for the next 5 years in grant, in TLT grant. You take that to the bank and say, hey, we have this guaranteed grant from the county, but we're not in it with your bank at all.
Yeah.
We
Got
don't
it.
pay the bank doesn't have a lien against the county, it's nothing like that. You're able to convince the bank that, hey, we have this grant that's guaranteed for this amount annually, so we want to borrow based on the fact that we can prove to you the county has awarded us a grant at X level in this way. Does that make?
That makes sense.
It does, and it's
Yes.
wonderful.
Yes.
Okay.
And so the interest rate then would be whatever you negotiate with the bank.
Right.
Right.
We would say that You know, maybe we put parameters on it, you know, no more than 6.5% or 6.75 or. you
I
know.
don't think you put parameters on it, Doug. I think they negotiate with
But
the
I'm saying
bank.
what we would reimburse them. So if they ended up getting a 10% loan, we'd only pay some other,
I think we play a flat amount each month.
yeah.
We stay
that's what I'm
completely
saying.
out of their negotiations with the
That's
bank.
what I'm saying, based
Yeah.
on some number. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
and those are details that we'd work through legal counsel and the treasurer.
Got it.
You know,
But ultimately, to make it simple for my finance brain, we could basically count on a monthly payment from the county that we, or that,
Annual payment.
or annual or monthly or
Some
whatever it is.
periodic payment.
Probably an annual payment. We just want to write you one check and not have something running through our books all the time. So,
Makes sense.
yes.
I think we got it.
Okay.
Rachel?
Did you?
So to say that another way, Doug's scenario is they would get a $1 million grant agreement,
Mhm.
500 in cash up front, and the other 500,000 paid out on an annual basis, period.
with some, interest rate. I guess we
I'm
can do it
hearing
either
two
way.
scenarios.
I'm not hearing any interest rate. This is a grant.
Okay, so
It's
then
just a grant over
so
time.
then well, I was thinking of a guarantee on your loan, which would be
But if-
somewhat more.
I mean, it's all tax dollars. We could cut out the interest. That would be great. Like I'm hearing I'm sorry, I'm confused. If it's it sounds like there's a grant and then a smaller annual commitment to pay off the line of credit that we would get and draw from.
So I'm hearing that
Right.
Doug is saying, give them $1 million, bottom line, in two different ways. They aren't paying the second 500 back, correct?
No,
Okay, so another way to say that is they're getting a $1 million grant. The first 500 is in cash. The second, you want to pay them in an annual payment, and it doesn't matter what the interest is. What you're providing them is an annual grant that you've already memorialized in a original agreement, kind of like we do with Visit Tillamook Coast, and they use that for their loan payment.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if their annual payment, I'm making up a number, if that 5 year, if it comes out to $300,000 a year and their payment is 330, they have 300,000. Am I
well,
getting
that's
that right?
that isn't actually what I had in mind. What I was saying is that
500,000.
you get 500,000, and then you'd have the guarantee that we, the county, would pay what you borrowed for that amount, including interest, because you're not going to get money for free. You're going to pay, let's say, 6%, and that's 118,000. So it'd be 118 times 5. But if you want, if council advises us and we determine it's $1 million, it's $500,000 upfront, 100,000, 100,000, 100, and 100 for 5 years. We could do that. You would be stuck then with the interest, whatever it is, with the bank.
Yes,
And
yes.
that wasn't my original thinking. You would go negotiate something with your bank and you'd say, look, the county, through a formal action, has guaranteed a certain amount to you, roughly equivalent to what you would pay the bank.
Yes.
Sure.
That's what I was thinking, but if it turns into just $500,000 here and then 100, 5 times, that would do too. And that would be, maybe this other is a departure from how we do grants. I don't know, that's a question for Rachel and legal counsel and others, so.
I don't recall a scenario where we've done that for a non-county facility.
And that could be, and there could be some
Mhm.
legal restriction. We just say that we'll give you $500,000 now and then another spread out over 5 years period, and you can go negotiate whatever interest rate you want. And
I would say that is absolutely the cleanest.
it
And if
certainly
you
would
want
be.
this executed in any kind of timely fashion, that would be the path to do.
Do we need to come back on the 27th then?
I would also like us to consider the $500,000 upfront and $1 million grant over time. So we have the two amounts. Doug suggesting 1 million, I'm suggesting 1.5.
I think that's why we need you to come back, because we need to know if you can borrow if that can work, right? If you can borrow, if we gave you 500,000 up front, how much can you borrow with a payment annually coming from us, but not to the bank, to you in a flat amount. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
I think it does.
But
Okay.
Doug's payment, he was thinking of it would be an annual like 118,000. So really it would be closer to 600,000.
But,
On the
but
other
not if we
end.
went back to what the
Yeah,
current
but that's what you
conversation
were
is.
originally saying.
Originally, I thought we'd cover the interest. In other words, you'd negotiate something with the bank, but the money would go to you.
Yeah.
And you'd be on the hook, and if you defaulted, they're coming after you, not the county.
So basically, the homework for us is to, we'll look at, get more details, sharpen the pencils, make sure everything's accurate, or if there's any new information accounted for, but basically, working with a lender to figure out, how the scenario works for them. Say, hey,
Yeah.
we're working with the county to, secure this thing over time. How does that work? How fast can it work? Can we move forward?
Right, because I think that's the question is what's the least that you need to get this phase done?
Yep.
And then how much has to be up front? How much can you finance that then we can make an annual payment to help you with that?
And so here's one more wrinkle. Let's say that we did $1 million, or 500 in cash, and then 500 or 100 to 5 times. No fidelity interest, that's your issue. So, and if you decided to go out and borrow the additional money at 7 years instead of 5, you'd still get the 5 years from us, and you'd be on the hook for the rest, but you'd have somewhat of a lower payment.
Right.
And so you'd be
Yes.
betting on 2 years out of, you've come up with the money then. So the cleanest way, I would agree with Rachel, is that the county commits for $1 million and you get it in 2 forms. You get $500,000, and then you get a 500 or 100,000 5 times in 5 different fiscal periods.
Mhm.
And then the second would be what Commissioner Bell suggested, somewhat more money, but maybe that could come together in the same form. So
Got it. And just to, I know that you guys have an annual budget cycle, I assume. Does that annual payment, is it possible to guarantee it for 5 years, or do we need to come and hang out with you guys every year to negotiate again?
Oh, I think
you would get some kind of a commitment from a board action.
Okay.
But that, what you just said is accurate. I think the budget committee and ultimately the board of commissioners could say, we're not gonna honor that, or we can't, or something bad has happened, we don't have the funds. But, it would be a considered business risk, because money is not coming from the taxpayers, it's coming from people who come to this community to rent rooms. And that's, now has an 11-year track record of considerable success. And so, and that's why I didn't say a larger amount, because that could fluctuate, and if something did go down, I think the county could still meet its obligations, but we're bringing in about $8 million a year.
Yep.
And so this is a relatively small amount, because you take the 30-70 split and money goes to the roads and all of that. But the remainder is somewhat discretionary, and so I'm comfortable with that number, and if it goes to another one, maybe that'll work too.
Okay.
Great, Rachel.
I would say that this would not be a budget committee decision. This is going to happen in the next month, and this is going to come in the proposals. Any of these proposals would be in the form of a grant agreement that you provide with the district.
But wouldn't the annual appropriation have to go through the budget committee? That's what I was thinking.
You will see in the TLT fund an allocation of projects.
Right.
But you don't, that is provided mostly for my benefit to show a tracking of projects.
Well, I'm familiar with that, like the chamber down south and the future council and some other things. So in other words, you line item them out, right?
Correct, to show clarity, but the budget committee doesn't actually vote on those projects. They're voting on the spending authority, which fluctiates within the fiscal year.
Okay. Well, we could sit and talk about all that, but my idea is you'd have a commitment from Tillamook County legally for $1 million.
Great. Or $1.5 million or $2 million.
Right.
I would say 2 is unlikely on my chair.
1.75.
We don't want to
So
hear,
let's negotiate within that line item.
we don't want to hear nothing.
You know what?
Noted.
Well, I'll tell you what you 3 ought to do. You ought to get up and leave this room right now before we change our mind.
Okay, yeah, well, that sounds like a great idea.
thank you for the conversation and for encouraging and pushing us.
Rachel, do you recommend that we invite them to come to our next board meeting and vote on it in the meeting?
So I had two questions. That was one of them. First is, what is my role in this? You asked about preparing the options. Is that actually something I'm doing, or are they preparing the options?
I would think they would prepare the options based on what they can do. I don't know what others think.
I was
Trying to
following,
exercise this new,
I was following instructions from Mike Gleason, who told me, get Rachel to provide you with some options.
and I'm also providing some feedback, taking guidance from Mike in clarifying where all my other duties are currently, if this is something that you think I should be working on and preparing a suite of options to bring back to you. So I will leave it at the board's discretion.
I would think that the options need to come to us from NCRD with what you were able to do. Give us the scenario, how much in cash, how much you are able to borrow, what that payment ends up being. Give us an option at $1 million, an option at $1.2 million, an option at $1.5 million, something like that. Let us see what this looks like. And I think you are the right people to prepare that as you talk with your lender, because you may come back and say, our only option is the 5. That's as high as they will go. I have no idea. So to me, that makes more sense than Rachel's time creating scenarios that we don't know if they're possible.
And I don't know either. I mean, I can, but I could see if I was starting to try to tease out information from them and come up with options, it may not be the best use of my time when I'm trying to piece things together.
Yeah.
As far as a timeline, I could see a scenario where the information is provided to you all, and you could tell me if you think it's in final form and it includes everything that you need to be able to deliberate on the 27th.
But we're sitting here in 13th now, and you all have work to do at your board and then at a lender. That would have to be posted for our agenda by the
20th.
By the 20th, because we have a short week because of conference.
And you would need to see it before the 20th to affirm that, yes, this is sufficient for me to make a decision on.
So I know I hate to push you guys out because I know the 13th is your deadline, but otherwise we're December 4th.
Well, I'm wondering, maybe, I'm trying to figure out what we're bringing back to the table. So we'll for sure talk about this tomorrow. We will talk with the lenders that we've spoken with. It sounds like, though, the conversation will shift a little bit from previous conversations, because now it's a conversation about having some legal guarantee based on a board action with the county to provide X numbers of dollars, so we can have a range. Say, hey, given that new information, what's the maximum we can loan and lend, and then how long would the process take to underwrite? Is what I'm hearing. All right, so I don't know how long it would take us to get that information. I don't know if you have a thought, Mary.
But the problem, I think, what we have is getting with the banks and getting them term sheets and providing the banks with the necessary information they need from NCRD, which in our most recent meeting with last week with one of our banks, the list was pretty long, what they wanted from, and it's understandable. I mean, they're lending money and they want to make sure they're going to get their money.
But the flip side is that that was us borrowing money and using our facilities or whatever else is collateral.
Right, we didn't mention that the county was going to provide a guarantee. Maybe that clause, when we are negotiating with banks, would lend a lot of weight, and we could achieve a long-term agreement quicker. So,
What do you have collateralized now? Your bond is a GO bond. You're against the tax revenue, right?
yes, the GO bond is the tax revenues.
But your 5-year.
I don't really know the answer to that question, but I will find out.
No, I mean, we're not trying to tell you how to run your business, but if the county's going to give you $1 million, for my part, I feel more comfortable in knowing that, I guess.
I understand. I will find out.
I don't want to throw another wrinkle into this or another alternative, but maybe another alternative could be if the bank process is going to take a while to even determine if it's viable. And if you know that you're supportive of that option, if it is viable, having not, you could do a grant agreement, or maybe it is just a letter of intent that's conditional that we will do this. But you're not actually doing the agreement until it gets further through the process. Maybe there's another mechanism. I don't know, just throwing out ideas.
That's a good idea. Or maybe we're doing the agreement regardless because we want to support the project, and then how they move forward is up to them.
True, which is what I'm hearing you wanted to do you were suggesting anyway, is you're willing to give them $1 million. You know it doesn't cover all of it. They're gonna have to come up with additional funding anyway, but as an aside, it provides an option to leverage it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's exactly my thinking. If you've got 50% guarantee, the other 50% is considerably easier to get.
so if it does not matter to you what the bank says, that whole conversation is moot.
That's their problem.
No,
in a
I-
way,
That,
it
that,
is-
it's an if, though, you know, if,
We understand that. It's been our problem for a while.
Right, right, and I think I'm looking at it differently, only that I'm saying somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million, right? And that really depends on that borrowing scenario, how we do that. I guess
So-
that's where I am.
I hear you, and what information exactly are we asking them to bring back?
Asking them to bring back, can they borrow the money they need to actually move forward? Because if you go to the bank and if we say we're gonna give you $1 million, but it doesn't actually get you there, then the $1 million is not of any use to you, right? Because now you've lost, from what I remember from the other presentation, you've lost your contract, you've lost your timeline, everything goes on hold because you can't move them forward in the time provided. Am I misunderstanding some piece of that?
Well, no, that's a correct understanding of what we presented last week. My guess is that so we're gonna get an update from the project management team tomorrow on, is phase 2 wrapping up on time? Can phase 3 start on time? So the exact dates, if there is wiggle room in that exact date, the 13th, we will understand what that is. So I wouldn't say the $1 million would be not useful. If it came in June, that may not be useful, but if it, I think this gives us enough to work with the lenders on, it sounds like what the conversation we'll have, Mary, is assuming that 500K can happen in cash up front. Let's see if that's enough to kickstart this next phase, but also in parallel, does it move the needle or pull the timeline in terms of underwriting a line of credit, given what we just spoke about with the 5-year annual allocation. And then there's a range in that annual allocation between 500 and $1 million. So really, I think that shifts the conversation with the lenders pretty significantly.
Hopefully so.
Yeah. I don't know if that answered your
That makes sense,
questions.
yeah, because if 500,000 doesn't get you there in cash, because you have to have more than that, then we have to come back and figure that out. And if you have to have 1.5 just to get there overall, can you borrow that $1 million so that we can pay it over time? I think that's why it matters for the bank part. Because if you can't borrow the $1 million and 500,000 plus 500,000 isn't gonna get you there, then we want to have this conversation a little bit further down the road when you have a solid what can get you there for less than the 2. Does that make sense?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah,
Numbers are hard to talk about.
yeah, they're easy to look at sometimes. Yeah, that's why finance spreadsheets are always a little tiny print. You can
Right.
never read them. Is there a letter that we could potentially, I think you mentioned a letter of intent. I'm just like, I guess it's a whole lot. I mean, we could pull up the transcript from this conversation if the bank really was questioning. I'm just wondering if we need something to say, hey, we're negotiating some kind of a deal with the county, and here's their letter of intent. Like, could we? How fast could we move on this? And what's the range of possibilities we could entertain here?
I think we'd have to vote on the letter of intent.
Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so when do we come back and in what forum? I think we're clear on what we're bringing. we could try our best to be back on the 27th, and if we recognize that there was a snafu or a longer timeline there, we could push it out. Do we want to consider that?
So coming back on the 27th would be a board meeting or board briefing?
It's a board meeting and we're voting on it. What do you think?
I think a board meeting, I think at this
Okay.
point, if, you know, we've had enough conversation to know there is a desire to support the project somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million, based on how you can make that work so that it gets you where you need to go, to allow us to put some upfront and as much as possible over time. I think if we come back and we have that information in front of us, we should be able to vote. Do you agree?
I do agree, if they're able to work within the time frame, which is that because next week we have a truncated week, we need to put it on the agenda by the 20th.
By the 10th, okay.
Oof, and we've got
Just
a very busy week next week.
Which means, and you all need to approve that it contains what you're looking for to be able to deliberate on. So I would give them the deadline of, I don't know how quickly you need to review this, but no later than the 19th. So you
Well,
can
there's-
look at it and we can get it on the agenda by 10 a.m. Wednesday.
I don't know what you think, Mary. I feel like that's not going to be.
It feels undoable.
Well, yeah, but we also have like a whole bunch of other
Yeah.
stuff happening on site next week too. But you know, just based on the conversation we had with the two banks, it
That
seems
seems like a pretty tight
so
timeframe.
why don't we just do ourselves a favor and push it out a week if that is doable? to
Yeah, if that
December
works
4th?
with your schedule, which it sounds like maybe it will, that you all have a little more flexibility
Yeah,
as you're.
and
in
then
So
place.
then we would present at a workshop meeting.
No, you could still present at our board
Sure.
meeting and we could vote on it on December 4. But we would ask for it would have to be on our agenda by the 29th, 10 a.m. on the 29th.
Well, it's
But
Well,
Thanksgiving.
yeah,
so
you're
we'll
gonna
have to
have
set it.
you're gonna have a deadline of the 27th, which puts the information to you by the 26th.
So you have to have the information by 11/26.
10 a.m., 11:26,
No, the 20, sure.
or 5 p.m.
Don't forget Thanksgiving.
Let's do 5 p.m. on the 25th. Then you have the 26th.
For us to
and then-
review it and
Yes, and
decide.
then it's not a last minute request to Debbie on the
Does
27th.
that account for Thanksgiving then?
Yes.
Days off?
Yes.
Okay, so 11/25, you need the info.
Correct.
please.
By end of
end of
business.
the day.
Yeah.
Not 11:26, 11:25, 5 p.m.
And then are you around the 26th to answer any questions that might come up?
I can be around on the 26th. We decided not to book a vacation for Thanksgiving this year.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no,
Me either. I'll be working.
we
We'll be
are,
here.
we are staycation people. We like being at home.
Well, when we live where we do, staycations
Yeah.
just take on a whole new meaning, don't they?
Yeah.
I'll be out of town.
No, you won't.
Unless you're married.
No, I mean, it sounds like the information that we're bringing, I mean, I don't think it's possible to underwrite an entire loan in that time. Like, we're not going to get to that point. But
No.
but having let's say, for example, we worked with the bank we mentioned earlier, and they seemed able to provide an updated letter of interest or term sheet given this information. Like, that would be sufficient. Yes?
Oh, well, one bank, we probably want to go with more than one bank.
Yeah.
So that's going to be tight. It's still tight, but we can do it. We can do it. We can do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, it seems to be me, if anybody can do it, it'd be the three of you.
Well, we're trying.
Come on, blow it up, Knuckles.
We can do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. We will.
Thank you very much,
Hopefully see you
Commissioners.
on the 4th. We'll get you information on the 25th.
Guys, this, because this puts a face to this.
Thank you, Barbara.
This is the kid,
Oh, nice.
this is his teacher.
Oh, wow.
Oh, awesome.
And
Thank you.
this is just a little,
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
it makes it real.
Okay.
Okay, and then 12/4 is the board meeting.
And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Hey, Rachel, what time would we be here on the 4th?
9 a.m.
9. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioners.
I've got to write 9 AM on it.
I'll talk fast. I'll talk fast.
Thanks, folks. Wonderful. Okay. All right, we won't see you before Thanksgiving, so happy holidays.
right. Happy holidays.
I feel like we should come back next week. I don't know.
Well, we won't be
You
here.
won't be here, but you can come, yeah, come sit in the room.
Okay.
Okay. This seems like a very minor ask after that one. So as we know, STIA is the Salmonberry Trail Intergovernmental Agreement or agency agreement that holds the lease to the Salmonberry Trail, and it is, as we've talked about, sunsetting next year. And so the conversations have been going about what does that mean? Do we re-up that particular agreement and in that structure, or do we do something different? And where the conversation has taken a turn right now is to do something different. And that something different is that OPRD has stepped up and said, we will take responsibility for staffing this project. We will have a staff person, probably 2 staff people that will be sort of the staff of STIA, if you will. And STIA would become a committee of OPRD. So it would still exist. It would still have some autonomy. The details of all that are being worked out as to what that actually looks like. So Parks' ask is that each of the members of STIA provide a contribution to Parks this year to fund Mike Caffaretta, who is actually from the Department of Forestry, if y'all know Mike, but he's been involved in the Salmonberry Trail since it began. And he would do a rotation over to Parks for 6 months, and he would help organize this. He would help us figure out what exactly does that mean when we say a committee under Parks? What are the roles and responsibilities of Parks, the committee, and the foundation? What are the authorities? All of that piece of it to design this. And there's some models that are there being looked at. The Lower Deschutes River Trail has a model similar to that. There's another one that we were talking about last night that I can't think of, Elk something in Southern Oregon that has a similar structure. So trying to figure out what's the right structure under Parks. But the really big piece of this is Parks has really sort of said, we can't do this. We can't be the ultimate responsible body. And they're stepping forward and saying, we will be the ultimate responsible body. The foundation will still raise the money. The foundation will still do probably the majority of coordinating with landowners and all of the complicated pieces, but the park is the backdrop for them and will provide, again, staff to coordinate and staff that has trail experience to provide that information.
Great.
So it's a great opportunity. They're looking for whatever we're willing to give. My ask would be $25,000 in TLT to go to OPRD for the next 6 months to pay for part of Mike's time, because everybody's trying to chip about 25. That gets at least the majority of his salary covered, and Parks will cover the rest in kind.
Yes, it's a great solution.
It's a great step forward,
Yeah.
because I think one of the fears that we've all had is if you hand this to a fledgling foundation that's 2 years old and something goes wrong with that foundation, the entire Salmonberry just goes away. Whereas if it is situated in Parks, not that we expect the foundation to fail, but if it is situated in Parks, it doesn't go away.
Oh, yeah.
And ultimately, you have the backing for liability of Parks, you have
Yeah.
the backing just of expertise. They
Yeah.
build trails, it's what they do.
Yeah, and
Whereas-
hopefully it means that the governor supports it, that the state of Oregon supports this project, so.
I don't think we have that guarantee yet, which is why we're all giving money to Parks, because right now they don't have enough, but yes, and the other, I mean, the foundation is hiring a lobbyist out of the grants and donations they have for this long session to try to get the state of Oregon on board with this,
Okay.
with actual money. We'll see where that goes.
Well, it makes sense to me because if and when, and more likely when, this gets done, that's gonna be a long-term asset, really a destination.
Yep.
And I can see this going on, 50 years from now, people will be doing that and coming from all over. And
Yep.
so you invest up front to get it done right with the right people and then turn it into something that works.
Yeah.
You know, if you try and save a few bucks here and there, like you say, then you have the risk that it goes down and then it sits and disintegrates and.
There's nothing there. Know that there will be more asks in the future in terms of both funding and the role of the county for the pieces of the trail that are in the county and are not bordered by a city or by ODF or by another natural partner. So there is a longer, bigger conversation, and I don't know whether it will come up in this part of the structure conversation or if that will be further into the future. But there will come up, and I think this is it'll be a great conversation. Is it parks? Who is it for us that takes that piece of it on? So I don't need to know that today. We don't have to ponder that today, but I do put it on the table because that is part of that broader conversation as well. As Parks isn't saying, yes, we'll take it, build it, maintain it, own it in your area. They're saying, we still need your partnership.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, good.
okay. Thank you. Thank you for
Anything
a
else?
few minutes.
All right, thanks, everyone. We are adjourned at 5:03.